Welcome back to the NYCC podcast. This is going to be our second episode in the new series. This week is Transgender Awareness Week. It's a week to raise awareness and educate others on the transgender community, and we're really lucky to be joined today on the podcast by Isla Monks, one of our graduate trainees, who shares her experiences with us about being a mother to a transgender daughter. Thank you, Isla.
Hi,
Do you want to
Nock.
give yourself a quick introduction?
Hi, so I only started at North Yorkshire back in August. I'm a graduate trainee in care provider services, and I'm loving my new job. So when I heard about the podcast and the issue, I thought, oh yeah, why not? I'll have a bit of a waffle.
So thank you so much for joining us again. I'm curious to know, why did it feel important for you to share your experiences as part of Transgender Awareness Week with colleagues at NYCC?
Well, this was a complete and utter shock to us when we encountered this, and I kind of thought there'd be plenty of other people out there that might be finding themselves in the same situation, and I just thought I'd offer my own experience and opinions and thoughts on the matter in case it might be of help to someone. There is a lot of it's quite a divisive issue, it seems. And yeah, I just thought I might be able to offer some insight, and maybe people might start to think a bit more deeply about the issue, other than just perhaps some of the negative opinion pieces and things that are out there on social media and in the news.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it's highly divisive, isn't it? And I feel like a lot of people who haven't experienced encountered people who might be transitioning or have different gender identities, it can be quite hard for them to understand, the nuances of the conversation. And because the media is so dominant in, these, fairly negative stories, I think that it's, wonderful that you've come on here to share your experiences, and hopefully people will understand it in a new light and hear some new perspectives.
Thank you. It is because I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this situation at all, and I certainly had an opinion prior to this, and it's definitely an issue that is worth taking the time to think on and consider. Because it is. I mean, it is a complicated issue, and although I'm in that position as a parent, it's not something that I will necessarily ever understand, because it's not me in that position. I can just offer my viewpoint as a parent and what I've learnt. But I don't suppose if you're ever that person in that particular situation, whatever it be, whether it be gender identity or anything else, unless you're that person, it's very difficult to understand entirely what it feels like.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for coming on and sharing your experience as a parent, because even though it's not directly the experience of a transgender person, it's definitely an important part of the conversation. So I understand that this is all quite new for you as parents, and it does, from us chatting, it sounds like you and your partner have been hugely supportive of your daughter over the last couple of years. I'm just wondering if you could talk me through how it's been as a parent to experience these changes and support your daughter throughout this time.
Oh, I would be lying if I said it hasn't been hard. It has been really hard. Because we had a year where there was really poor mental health, and we just could not get to the bottom of it whatsoever. And eventually it came out, and initially it was quite a relief. It was just like, oh my goodness, thanks, we understand. And then you start to think, where has this come from? We hadn't had any signs previous to this like some parents do. Wasn't on our radar whatsoever. And so we start to just, you start to have conversations and ask questions, and yeah, and I think Yeah, and so as a parent, you come from a place of worry and concern, and you have all the natural concerns. Being honest, is like, where's this come from? You know, have they been influenced by social media, things they're reading, by friends? You know, what sort of life is this going to entail? Are they going to encounter problems? You know, so you just have to sit back and listen, I suppose. And then come the practicalities of clothing, telling other people, name. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is when you hear the new name that they've chosen, and then you have to use it. And it's a big, you know, it is a big transition, because you bring the child into the world and you know them as a certain way, and then you have to make the adjustment. And ultimately you get to the place where you want to, and you're happy to, because that's what they want to do, to be, and need to do to be happy. But it is difficult, and then obviously you have other friends and family that you need to tell. But ultimately you just have to bring it back to, they are your child, they're still your child that they always were. But as long as you bring it back to the fact that you love them, that's what you have to do, and you research and find out what it is you need to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like, you know, the fact that you always bring it back to them, and, you know, what is best for your child, I think that's just a really wonderful thing. And, you know, not everyone is in the fortunate position where their parents do have that attitude towards it. And I think, you know, that makes so much difference for a young person. You know, obviously it's not without its challenges for you as a parent, but the fact that, you know, you're putting them first, I just think is really wonderful.
That's why how you hope to be, and then you just as a parent get challenged, and then you have to deal with the things that come your way. But I do feel quite proud of ourselves, really. I know that sounds a funny thing to say, but you hear of so many horror stories in lots of different, just different areas of life and issues, and I just think how we've come through it to the other side. Well, I mean, we're not at the end, but we've come through and it's going okay. But, you know, I just feel really pleased that we've managed that, and that we can be supportive.
So I know we sort of mentioned at the beginning, obviously the media can have a huge impact, and it's quite a negative place at the moment, in relation to trans rights, and I think that's hugely influential on, you know, our society. I personally, you know, think there's a lot of misconceptions that come from that, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions, particularly on how easy it is to go through, you know, medical transitions and timescales. And I think there's sometimes the idea, you know, that this can happen very, very quickly, when actually, if you look at the NHS, you know, this process for most people takes years, and it's not, you know, something that people just decide overnight and just, you know, are able to act on. You know, could tell us a little bit more about the process and the timescales and what like that's been like for your daughter, in terms of like the medical and GP side of it.
So when you find out, you go through a process within your own family of working out what's going on and and how you're going to deal with it, and then you have to approach the GP. They're sort of like the gatekeeper, and so they then signpost you to help that you may be able to access. However, it's the referral to the gender identity clinic, we were told, would be about a 3-year wait. And so when you go to the clinic, as far as I'm aware, we've not got there yet, is that you do a lot of therapy and talking through the situation, and then what comes after that, I'm not entirely sure, but I presume that's more the physical side of things. But 3 years, you know, is a really long wait. However, I've got a teenager now, and I must say that although access to the clinic is a great thing, because it's really the only place that you can get really specific, in-depth talking therapy on the issue, So that's what everybody really wants. And like as a parent, you would want for them as well to talk through it all. And hopefully they're in a place where they're willing to talk about it. The other side of that is that you can adapt your life, and they kind of think they would really want to see that in some regards by the time you get there.
Mm-hmm.
So like my daughter goes to school in a female school uniform. That was a big milestone.
Yeah.
She goes by her new name, and so that's on the we call her that in the home. She's known as that to friends. And now she's known as that in school. It's on the school register. So there are steps that you can take before that. And so by the time you get to the clinic, you would be living, the life as your new identity.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said about the media, it is very negative, but I feel like there's a lot of negativity on both sides, and there needs to be, as you referred to earlier, about nuance, because is that you get a lot of activists that trying to do good things for the cause. But it's almost like, but then you've got the other side, and it's like people take their standpoint and it almost stifles debate, in my opinion. Because people are so passionate about their own viewpoint, they get hung up on almost they get hung up on issues, and it, like I said, it stifles debate. And so there somehow needs to be, and I don't think the media helps on that, because they pick on issues that are really emotive, like the whole toilet issue, and it sort of like loses that loses the focus on the fact that there are people here, and it's about being able to live a life that they're happy with. But then there are issues that also need to be discussed as well. You know, a lot of these people are children, you know, and it is right to get, you know, to delve into the issues and discuss where they're coming from, how their opinions are developed, how they feel, you know. So for me as a parent, I have to be honest, and I do think some of that delay potentially has a purpose in, like, you know, it allows, you know, but what I'm saying is the passage of time is good for any issue. I think that the negative aspect of the passage of time is that you're waiting for that really specific therapy that helps people with the mental health and talk through the issues, but also for having that time to live as the new gender has to be a good thing as well, because you're living out how you feel like you want to live your life. And so that allows time to think, well, this is good, this is not so great. But again, it's such a complex issue.
So you did mention your daughter's school, and it's been a while since I was at school, but what I've heard from friends and family...
Oh, not as far back as me.
But it's even, you know, even in 10-15 years, I think the landscape has, you know, really changed. I mean, I was brought up with two mums, and when I was at school, you know, that was unheard of, really, and my family structure, you know, was very different, and no one even came out as, you know, gay at school. And I think, you know, that conversation has changed very rapidly since I've left. And I've heard from people, you know, friends and family, that there's definitely a lot more acceptance, not only of different sexualities, but of different gender identities, of trans and non-binary students, and that's from, you know, both the teacher and the student side. So I was just wondering, you know, from your experience, would you say that is true?
I would say that was true, but obviously when you encounter or have an experience with something, you become more aware of it. You have like an issue like of I don't know, sexuality or gender identity, you tune into it more. And so since then, I've become more aware and noticed. I have noticed it more in schools, and I have friends that work in schools and they say the same thing. So when we encountered this, you know, school had an existing procedure in place that they've had followed. Follow the name on the register, being known in school. When she talks about her friends, you know, there's a lot of, she seems to have found her tribe. So yeah, it's definitely, and although she has encountered some children that are unkind, there does generally seem to be more of an acceptance of that within school.
I mean, that's good to hear. I guess it feels like the conversation is starting in a way that the conversation didn't really exist when I was at school, or when you were at school. And I think, you know, children and young people perhaps feel more able to have those conversations and are more accepting of other identities because of that. And it's just good to hear that, you know, schools have got policies in place, so that there are, you know, certain procedures that they follow. I'm sure that must make it easier as a parent for you to navigate those changes as well.
It's almost like people have tread the boards before us.
Yeah.
And so, like, whereas now there are other children in school as well, and they've forged a path so that when we've encountered it, it has been more straightforward.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons for talking, really, is because you know, it is happening more and more, as it should, because people should be able to be themselves. You know, and by talking about it, it brings the conversation in to other people and maybe give them the opportunity to have a think about it. But I think it's, you know, the more open we are about all these different issues, you know, and it's great that you're doing this because, you know, unless people encounter this, then they don't tend to give it too much thought, or they're more susceptible to just, you know, hearing the negative side of things, when there's far more to it than that, and it's far more nuanced than than like simply being down to, as the media would have you believe, who uses what toilet.
And then just with that, really, I guess, do you have any advice to anyone who is supporting transgender young people or friends or family? I wonder if maybe you found any like community or support networks yourself that might be useful to share with other people.
I think that if your child comes to you, is to come from a place of love, like I said before. They're still your child, and they just want to be happy, and they're trying to navigate a way to achieving happiness. And so it's just, don't panic, listen, try and understand, research, you know, look for, you know, we're still trying to navigate that now, find the right kinds of support. I know in school she had some counselling from Bernardo's, they're a charity offering support. And I know there are other local charities which, because of lots of issues we've got in our family, we've been trying to find the time for that. You know, we have some like neurodiversity.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some issues I've been navigating as well. My cough is Tourette's. And it drives me round the bend. So I've been trying to manage that like a full-time job. You know, we've all just managing different things. So we, you know, life's busy and complicated. So, but there are groups out there that we still need to try and access. But it's just don't, you know, just don't panic. They're still your child, and just try and listen and show that you're willing to listen. But like, as a parent, you're entitled to ask the questions, you know, and you need to ask them, you know, so that you can support them and, you know, safeguard them as well. But, you know, GPs are also willing to listen, maybe just when you're booking the appointment, select a GP that you know is one of, how dare I say it, one of the better GPs in that, you know, maybe that you have experience with, that's, you know, willing to give the time and listen, because there's a lot of form filling. And just like you were alluding to, groups, you know, peer support for both parent and child. My child went to a Christian youth camp, and up till this point hadn't met other trans children other than online, and they came back a different child after being around.
Was that a Christian trans youth group?
Not specifically for trans, but there were just happened to be several trans children there, and came back a different child, having had the opportunity to meet and hang out. And that validation, we have I have 2 children. She's one of them that are autistic. I'm autistic myself, and being around other people, your peers, is huge way of validating yourself. And it's hard to sorry, I was pinging, hard to over-egg how brilliant that is. And so if you can find these groups where you can meet and work through the challenges together is a massive thing. I mean, you see that in the LGBT, you know, community, and that's why they exist, because people get such joy from being around people that they relate to.
But I just wanted to thank you again, Isla, for coming on and talking to us for Transgender Awareness Week.